Good morning or good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen of Fleet APAC. I would like to welcome you to our third expert meeting around the theme of mastering fleet sourcing and funding in APAC. I'm not alone today. I'm joined by my dear colleague Luberto van Buiten, who is our chief editor. Myself, I'm Yves Helven, your Fleet APAC expert.
Yeah, thank you, Yves, for having me at this expert meeting. I'm very curious about all the developments, of course, in the APAC region. So I'm looking forward to the meeting.
Thank you so much, Luberto. Let's go through the agenda first. We have a packed agenda, a very interesting one, all around sourcing and funding. Now, we all know that APAC has its own specificities, that it's not the same as in Europe or the US or even in Latin America. And the same is true for sourcing and funding. So the questions that we are asking ourselves is, do I tender the same way in APAC as I would do in Europe or in the US? What are the things that I need to be careful about? But also, we're going to talk about specific experiences of fleet managers who are managing fleets and who are tendering in APAC. So we're combining all these elements in this one expert meeting. And we're starting with a first session, which is called Insights Sharing Ultimate Sourcing Recommendations for Tendering in APAC. And we're lucky to have two experts who are going to share their experiences with us. The first expert is Cameron Kerr, who is the APAC bid manager at Oryx. And then we have Thierry Faure, who is Asia CCO at Avens, Deputy CEO ALD, MHC Mobility Thailand. This is our first session. Second session, we go really into the heart of the question, and we have picked one country, and that is the Philippines. And we'll tell you more about that country. What are the practices in that country? What is the landscape? What is the ecosystem in the Philippines? All these elements will help you when you need to tender for a solution in the Philippines. Then our third session, and we're very proud about this one, is about the Fleet APAC Summit in Bangkok. This will happen on June 12 and June 13, and I will share a little bit about the program with you. And you'll see that we continue on our line of providing good information, good insights to Fleet APAC experts and supply chain. Then we finish the day by a panel discussion where we try to discover the 5 essentials of fleet procurement in APAC. And we have an amazing panel today for you. First panel member is Anna Proshak, who is procurement category lead at Philip Morris International. We have Ankur Sharma, who is regional sourcing leader, fleet at GE Healthcare. And then we have Somo, who is joining us from Thailand and who is sourcing manager at Boehringer Ingelheim. And then we have Raluca Mosu, who is the global fleet manager for an animal healthcare company. Ladies and gentlemen, I think it's time for us to start. Just want to remind you what these expert meetings are all about. We do multiple of these per year. These are virtual 90-minute conferences. We aim to deliver as much expertise and as much insights as we can to fleet managers, to the supply chain, and everyone interested in APAC. And we call it your gateway to APAC content and networking. This is obviously an organization or an initiative that we do for you. Now, for the first session, Ultimate Sourcing Recommendations for Tendering in APAC, I would like to call Cameron and Thierry to the front of the stage. And there is Thierry.
Hello, everyone. Good
Hello,
morning,
Thierry.
good afternoon.
Good morning, good afternoon for you, based in Thailand. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Can you make us jealous and tell us a little bit about the weather in Thailand right now?
I think if I tell you everything, I'm not sure you will be jealous because it is a very hot season. We are waiting for the rain season, not yet started. So it's really hot in Bangkok, 38, 39, and the temperature felt is quite often 43, 44,
Oh my
with
God.
a lot of humidity. So maybe you are not that jealous.
It sounds
Maybe
like a bit,
2 weeks.
a bit of a challenge indeed. I hear from my colleague Benedict that we have some technical issues with Cameron. So Thierry, I suggest we start with you. And we would like to deep dive into the hows and the whats of regional tendering in APAC. So my first question to you would be a very simple question. How does it work at Avens if I need to tender for a leasing solution for the region? What is my first step? What would I do?
Actually, most of the tenders are global with some APAC dimension in it. And there are many of those, and there are some global fleet manager in this expert meeting, which can relate to this. They include the APAC countries where they have footprint in global tenders. So within Avens, such tenders, RFI, RFP, then RFQ, are managed centrally from Europe by team members, colleagues of mine who are in Europe, or in Paris or in Amsterdam, it depends. There are some very rare cases of APAC-only tenders. For those, I would be the single point of contact. Now, depending on client footprint, client governance, there will be some form of regional coordination from my side, or actually there will be none, and it will be a market-by-market approach. As you mentioned in your intro, if APAC is very different from the other regions. It's big geography, it's a lot of disparities across the countries. So what I see is tenders for a given country with one regional fleet manager involved in those local tenders. This I see. And I think it's a rather good practice compared to trying to go into an APAC tender because of this huge diversity of countries, markets, which tends to make it a bit mission impossible compared to what could happen in Europe or what could happen in Latin America. But I see that Cameron has joined, so that's
indeed.
great.
Apologies for being late, everyone.
No
Good
problem,
afternoon,
Cameron.
maybe a good evening to you.
We're happy.
I just answered the first question, but I let you go through it, and I'm pretty sure that there will be similarities in what your response to what I said.
Oh, yeah, most definitely.
Thanks, Thierry and Cameron. Thank you so much for joining us. No problem for the technical issues that happens. My first question to Thierry was more about the how, right? A global or a regional customer needs a new solution or needs to revisit its solution in the APAC region, reaches out, in this case, to you, Cameron, or to your colleagues in the bid desk in Australia. And my question was, what happens next? How do you deal with these tenders? One of the things that Thierry shared with us for Avens is that APAC tenders are rarely isolated and are typically part of a global tender.
Yeah, I'd agree.
Oryx is an Asia-centric leasing provider. So can you share with us a little bit about how things work on your end?
Yeah, look, so I mean, my role in the business is to coordinate our responses. And as Thierry was indicating, the individual markets in the APAC countries are all distinctly different. So a global RFP will come in, the APAC will be a part of it. We'll identify the countries in the group that want to participate, and then I disseminate the questions and consolidate everyone's responses. One of the things to be conscious of is that the answers are often going to be different between countries, depending on what the market maturity is. Technology levels in each market are going to be slightly different. So we'll get a question about driver helplines, for example. Right now, everyone has a driver helpline. Is it always going to be in a local language? Usually going to be in a local language. A question the other day asked me if they were going to be able to provide one in English as well, because the company had English drivers in each country. And no, the short answer in some of those countries is they don't do that. So you have, but in other countries they do. So we're getting these. I remember providing a APAC response to an RFP a little while ago, and in each question I had to provide 6 or 7 different answers, because each of the countries had a different answer to that specific thing. So that is the process that we go through. So we disseminate the questions among the participating countries. I consolidate their responses, and then we feed that back. The tender typically then goes to the next round, and then I have a whole lot of conversations with the tenderer about why my answers were as diverse as they were. And the reality is, my view, and I'm probably potentially leading into your next question, Eve, is that the tender was commenced in an inappropriate method to manage the Asia Pacific region, right? So they've come. Most of these tenders come out of the US or they come out of Europe, and the intent of the process is, we have a way that we want this to happen. Tell us that you can do that. And what we tend to find is that our answers are typically, look, we can't do that, but we can achieve the outcome that you're after. We just use a different methodology. So that becomes part of our process is explaining the context behind the answers that we provide. And part of my process in the group is also providing internally into the group the context behind the questions that are being asked, right? Because I operate out of Australia, and a lot of the questions that we see are quite common. I think the Australian leasing market and the European leasing market and the US leasing markets are very similar. So I understand why questions are being asked, but when you put that question into an Asia Pacific country, they'll just go, why do they want to know that? And I have to provide that context. I'm almost interpreting on behalf of the customer into the group, and then consolidating the responses, then interpreting the responses back out to the customer. So you can see this is why the answer is what it is, and why there's a divergence between the question that you asked and the answer we're going to be able to provide. And it's quite simply just that maturity gap.
So it's a tender exercise, but also an education exercise at the same time, if I understand correctly. Yeah. Thierry, also your experience?
I mean, I concur to everything Cameron said. There are so much differences. I see markets where there is confusion between an operating lease and a finance lease. So the educational dimension is essential. As I mentioned, I think a good practice for the companies who have enough resources in the region, I would say, is market-by-market tender with a regional fleet manager or regional category specialist who can contribute to the education of the local market, who can ask, I would say, relevant questions instead of irrelevant questions. So I think that's a good practice across the region to go with market-by-market tenders, and having someone who has a minimum understanding of the complexity of the region to support the local market in qualifying some of the answers, or even asking only what can be asked to avoid creating unnecessary work, which would then result in, as Cameron said, having to explain during many situations why is it different from market A to market B.
Thank you. This is a question that's coming in from the audience. Is there still a benefit of global or regional tendering, taking into consideration what both of you said? There's local identities, there's local divergencies. Is it, should I go into the regional exercise as a fleet manager, or should I indeed go directly for a country-by-country exercise? What would you recommend in a few words? Cameron, maybe you first.
Yeah, look, I think there's an efficiency benefit to tendering regionally, and I'm not going to dilute Thierry's points because they're valid, right? But I think the tender needs to be structured appropriately, and it needs to be informed. The questions need to be informed. I think that's probably where Thierry was going. If you can ask the right questions into that process, so you're running one process across multiple countries, you're effectively running market-by-market tenders, but you're doing it all at once. Okay, I think there's an efficiency benefit there. But I'm not going to disagree with Thierry's point that a market-by-market tender process, while it's lengthier and it's less efficient from an operational point of view, it's usually going to achieve very similar outcomes and probably a little bit more education in there at the same time. You have to factor that into how you are as a company and how you're positioned, how your procurement is being positioned, because I think we understand that global tenders occur and it's a lot easier to fold into a global tender. But I think if you prep for it properly, then you can potentially be successful anyway.
Do you see, question to the both of you, I'm going to start with Thierry. Do you see more focus on APAC from a tender perspective? Are there more tenders than, let's say, a few years ago?
And it's hard for me to say because I do not have, I have experience from my previous role, which was a global one. I don't see a trend in increase in what we would call regional tender. I see more companies, and I commend them for having a regional specialist of fleet supporting the local markets in the way they are going to tender. And when Cameron was talking about efficiencies, I think there are efficiencies around the template, having templates which can be recycled from one market to another is a first efficiency. I mean, what I'm saying may look very basic, but whether it is for VRFI qualitative information on the products and services available, on a quote sheet, having someone for the company in the region who brings this common templates to the market, I think is already an efficiency.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Thierry. Cameron, from your end, do you see that APAC is more on the agenda than before from, regional, global perspective? Do you see more tenders coming in in your department?
If there were, it'd be a marginal increase.
Okay.
I think what I am seeing is there are certain industries where it's more prevalent than others. So pharmaceutical is an example where we see quite a lot of global tenders that come through that incorporate the fold APAC into their process. That's probably the most common industry that does it. And I think there's a drive to operational efficiencies inside that industry, which is leaning itself towards this globalization of policy. But I wouldn't suggest that there's been an increase in APAC tenders in the last couple of years. I think it's reasonably consistent. But I think that even that concept is new to 4 or 5 years ago. So if we went back 6 years and made a comparison to that, we say yes, there's a massive increase, because 6 years ago this APAC-wide RFPs just didn't exist. Oryx sort of built our structure on the basis of this phenomenon that had suddenly commenced, which was these APAC-wide tenders and being folded into these global tenders. That suddenly started to happen probably 5 or 6 years ago. And we've jumped up, we've hit a plateau, and that's the level that we've operated at since then, in my view.
All right, thank you. Let's go to the next question, which is more about the tips and tricks. I've already distilled a few tips that you've shared with us. Thierry, I remember you mentioning you work with a good regional template. Also the importance of someone managing the tender regionally on the customer side, not just on the supplier side. Country by country being a good alternative to a regional tender. Let's talk quickly about the mistakes, right? Because I suppose that in the tenders, and Thierry, you've already referred to that, you also, Cameron, people who tender for the first time in APAC will most probably make a few mistakes. What can you highlight a few things that you see where you think by yourself, okay, we should not do this, there is a better alternative? Can I start with you, Cameron?
Yeah, I would certainly. I'll give you an analogy. I think a lot of times when a tender comes out from a global source, the spotlight of the tender has been focused on the wrong part of the business. So particularly when it's coming into APAC, so a global procurement team will come in and go, I know what I want. I'm going to ask these customers if they provide what I want. And again, this aligns with what Thierry was saying. I think if they took that spotlight off and they shot it into the region first, and said to their experts in the region, this is what we're trying to achieve. What's the best way for us to engage the market to achieve those things? Then you're potentially going to be a bit more successful. Fundamentally, we just get asked bad questions for our region. That's the mistake that we get made the most. And the question that I was thinking about this on my way here. We get asked a lot if we'll lease electric vehicles. The answer is yes, but it's a pointless question. Because the problem with electric vehicles in fleet in Asia Pacific is not whether you can get them or not whether they can be leased, is whether you can operate them, whether they have the operational capacity to meet the needs of your business. A better question is, these are our sustainability objectives, how will you help us solve them? So if you came to the Asia Pacific under the understanding that it's a diverse market, that each of the countries are going to have slightly different mechanisms, operational mechanisms inside the industry, but you say, I'm going to ask objective-based questions, then you're going to get the answers you get are going to be a lot more informative. So I think instead of saying, I think that's fundamentally the mistake. Yeah, if you come to us with objectives and ask us how we're going to achieve your objectives, you're probably going to be on the front foot when the responses come in, and you'll learn a lot about the industry in Asia Pacific at the same time.
Thierry, from your perspective, you agree with Cameron?
I agree. So on the sustainability, one mistake indeed would be to come with a list of vehicles and tell a vendor, quote me this same vehicles across all the markets. Just big mistake. Similar type of mistake would be to try to compare prices across markets. Differences in currency, differences in taxation, it would just be another big mistake. Going through the objectives, as Cameron suggested, is the good approach. Not going too much in details, staying at the high-level objective and asking for advice on some of the objectives, be it sustainability, be it safety. Well, if I take sustainability, the buzzword, sustainability is about reducing emissions. And reducing emissions can be achieved by focusing on engine size, weight of models, and engine type based on what is available in the market. So asking the question about the objective for each of the market is a good approach, rather than saying, I have these EVs or HEVs in mind, please provide quotes.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, I think that point extends beyond sustainability. And an example I can give you is we got asked a little while ago in Australia and New Zealand a company came out of Europe and said, can you quote the Peugeot 308 for us? And we went, oh, yeah, okay, they sell that in Australia. So yes, we can. But there are 35 Peugeot dealers in Australia, in all of Australia. And Australia's not a lot of people in Australia, but it's a big area.
Mm-hmm.
And Hyundai, who sell the i30, which is a very comparable car, have 150 dealers. Yeah. So the question itself, because it's come from a European base without a reflection of what's the participation rates and what the market is in Australia, end up being a poor question. So I've had to respond to, yes, we can give you that quote, but this is a better vehicle for you. Right? And there's an education piece that has to come back. And sometimes it's really hard to provide that education when the question is, can you lease EVs or give me a quote on a Peugeot 308? You're trying to have conversations at that point, and the conversation really need to be had before the question was written.
Yeah. And I think both of you highlight perfectly that when going into a tender in APAC, be it a regional one or local one, it makes sense to reach out to your suppliers, have that conversation first before launching the formal tender, right? It's a collaborative aspect to tendering in APAC. Just two short questions before we close this session. Can I tender OEMs? Would you recommend tendering OEMs in APAC?
This is a question for Europe.
Can we tender OEMs? Look, you can, and I've seen it done. It's the results are different to what you would see if you're running the same process in Europe. We were having a conversation about this last week or the week before. Companies that sell cars across all of Asia Pacific do not want to supply a single discount framework across the entire region because the infrastructure costs in each country are so significantly different. So if I'm shipping from Korea, so let's use a local manufacturer as example, Hyundai or Kia. If I'm shipping Hyundais or Kias out of Seoul and they're going to Australia and then New Zealand, that's two different ships. And then if they need to go to Indonesia, that's another one. If they need to go to the Philippines, that's another one. If they need to go to India, which is a completely different direction, that's another one. If I'm shipping the same type of vehicle into Europe, one much larger ship goes to one location, drops all the cars off, and then they get trucked through all of Europe. A lot easier to have a single discount structure across all of Europe when the infrastructure cost is so consistent. In Asia Pacific, it's not. The other problem that you'll find is that companies won't participate. The participation rate will be really poor because, quite simply, companies in Asia Pacific, automobile companies in Asia Pacific, are just not used to that kind of process going on. So you tend to find that they are unprepared for it. which means the process can be successful, but it's just lengthier. So instead of sending out your questionnaire and getting the result back and go, that's the result, great, make a decision, you get your result back, and then you have to interrogate the result, and then you have to go out to the companies that didn't participate, and you say, hey, you didn't give us numbers, can you give us numbers? Or you only gave us numbers in these countries, not these ones. You're then interrogating the outcome rather than just being able to interpret it. So it's much more difficult to be successful, and it's much less likely to get a consistent savings framework. So I mean, we would just lean to, you should be letting your FMO do that negotiation locally.
There you go. FMO, fleet management organization, leasing company, right? Yeah.
Leasing company. You should be letting your leasing company do that negotiation locally.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much, Cameron. Thierry, can I tender fuel or charging solutions?
So this one is really a question for Europe. No, you can do it country by country. For fuel, there are countries where you can do it. Charging, I mean, again, it will be country by country, only in the markets who have matured enough on the charging infrastructure. There are not many. I mean, let's set China aside. I mean, I have posted recently on LinkedIn for Thailand where there is a kind of EV boom. Market is booming, yes, but the charging infrastructure is still patchy. It's growing, but it's still patchy. So you can tender fuel and charging only on a local level, and not in all markets.
Very clear. Thank you so much, Thierry, for your contribution today, for your answers. Cameron, same to you. Thank you so much for your support again in this session. Gentlemen, I wish you a very good evening. And I hope to see you soon in Bangkok. Now, let's go to the goodbye. Our next session is a country deep dive, which means that we're going to involve an expert, a fleet manager in this case, who is based in Philippines, and Cheryl, who is joining us today from, we don't have Cheryl yet. Well, it seems, ladies and gentlemen, that we have a little issue of Cheryl joining us. So if you please allow us a minute to reconnect with her and see if she can dial in. Benedict, otherwise I suggest we go to the Fleet APAC Summit topic first, and then we'll try to reconnect with Cheryl afterwards. So, ladies and gentlemen, technical problems exist all over the world. What we're going to do now is we're going to jump to the next topic, which is the Fleet APAC Summit, which I'm very excited to talk to you about. And then after the information about the Fleet APAC Summit, we'll try to we'll try to connect with Cheryl again and see if she's available for her topic. Benedict, if you can please go to the next slide. Thank you so much. So we've already shared a bit of information with you about the Fleet APAC Summit, right? Let me reiterate a little bit on the reason why we're doing this, why we're focusing so much on Fleet APAC. Now, as you know, from a global fleet perspective, we're trying to inform as many people as possible about the topics that matter for fleet managers and for suppliers. And for a few years already, the question has risen on developing more content, more information about the APAC region. Now, we all know that the APAC region is complex. It was, again, one of the remarks from Thierry and from Cameron in the very first subject. So it means that there's a lot of questions, there's a lot of demand for insights. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with Fleet APAC. Fleet APAC exists since last year. As an umbrella, as a brand name, we have developed multiple initiatives under that umbrella name, one of them being the advisory board, one of them being the expert meetings that we are doing today. But then the most important one for this year is the Fleet APAC Summit in Bangkok. So this will be happening on June 12th and June 13th. We aim to provide you with networking opportunities, with a lot of content, but also a lot of opportunities to meet your colleagues in APAC and meet your suppliers in APAC. We're including also an Inspiring Women in Fleet breakfast. As you know, this is an initiative that we started about 1.5 years ago to celebrate the role of female fleet professionals. We're doing that also in Asia-Pac. And really important is that there's an expert conference with international speakers. Now, if you would allow me, I'll go into a little bit more detail and share with you the program of the Fleet APAC Summit. We start on June 12th with an APAC advisory board meeting, and then towards the evening, we have a welcome reception at the pool of the hotel. This will be a great opportunity for the Fleet APAC community to meet each other, have a drink at the same time, but not too much, because the day afterwards, we start pretty early at 8 o'clock with the International Inspiring Women in Fleet session. And then we open the summit itself around 9:30. We've decided to split the summit in 4 different pieces. The 3 first pieces are literally the building blocks, are just information for you. And then we conclude and we translate that information in the 4th block, in the 4th session, into recommendations focused on strategies. First block, fleet management landscape from region to countries, literally deep dives on the most important fleet countries in Asia-Pac. So you'll be coming out of these sessions knowing a lot more specificities about the practical things of fleet management in Asia. Second block, car leasing in APAC. Like we've heard before, car leasing is becoming more and more popular in APAC. So we're going to deep dive into the leasing infrastructure, the leasing ecosystem. And we do that by starting with an executive leasing panel where we have execs of the biggest leasing companies in Asia-Pac. Benedict, if you want to go to the next slide, please. Then the third block is car manufacturing and fleet strategy. So first block, country knowledge, second block, leasing, third block, OEMs. Now in the fourth block, we bring everything together and we go into strategic recommendation with a focus on which vehicles should I select for my policy, sustainability, safety, and TCO. Typically the 4 strategic targets of any corporate fleet. And then towards the end of the day, the advisory board will come on stage and they will share with you the 7 actions for a safe, sustainable, and cost-efficient APAC fleet. And that will then be the closing of the Fleet APAC Summit. As you can see, it's a packed program, but it's a very interesting one. And it really gives you a foundation on fleet management in Asia-Pac. I'm going to check with Benedict if we have Cheryl, and Benedict gives a thumbs up. So we'll go back now to our previous topic of the Philippines. Cheryl, good afternoon. It's a pleasure having you here. Can you hear us well?
Hello.
Hello.
Hello, Eve. Sorry,
Hello.
I have some issue here.
No problem, Cheryl. We have you. We have you now. That's the most important. We're super glad to for you to join us today and to explain us a little bit more about the Philippines. Cheryl, please go ahead.
All right. Thank you so much, Eve. So, yeah, so I'm, first of all, I would like to introduce myself. So, my name is Cheryl Esteban, and I'm a sourcing manager supporting the general requirements of Beringer Ingelheim, Philippines. So, I joined for several years now in the company. In 2015, I started working on purchasing function, and included in my scope is, of course, supporting the fleet management requirement. So this topic is very much close to my heart because actually year on year, since I joined, this is very topic that is always being discussed, and we tried as much as possible to conduct a study year on year to see if leasing is a good option or feasible for us. But of course, there are many factors in terms of the market dynamics, as discussed earlier in Philippines. There are many challenges and factors that we need to consider. So now here we are, still at the buying option still. And so for this for this morning, in your case, and good afternoon to our other participants, I would like to share in terms of at least provide or establish a knowledge baseline for fleet managers, and talking in the procurement perspective. We want to check what are the realities and common practices in the Philippines. And as fleet managers, it is also important to have a better understanding of the market dynamics and skills. So without further ado, I'd like also to go on the next slide, because we want to check what are the key factors that needs to be considered by an effective fleet managers. So here, can you go back a little bit? Yeah. Yeah. Yes. So before that, we will as well answer 7 key questions that will help us later on related to the fleet topic. But then before anything, I will share first the economic and demographic profile of Philippines. So here, as of 2023, our gross domestic product had already reached at 435.68 billion US dollar, and it's consistently growing at around 6%. And also, this is expected to reach or remain constant throughout 2024, and projected to reach at 698 billion in 2028. So the year-on-year growth of GDP will also boost the spending capacity, especially on the middle class, which led to the exponential growth in motor vehicle ownership. So in terms of the highest share in GDP, we can see here that as of last under the wholesale and retail, trade and repair motor vehicles and motorcycle sectors are the highest last year, 18.6, and followed by the manufacturing sector at 17.9%. In terms of the population, as of 2020, we are at 109 million, but we grew by 9 million after 4 years. And if you notice here, our average age is 26 years old, predominantly working age population, I would say. In terms of car to capita, as of 2022, there were about 120 motor vehicles per 1,000 people. So the increase of the motor vehicle was seen due to the lack of public transport infrastructure in the Philippines. Hence, it is a necessity for each of the household to at least own a personal vehicle. Second, if for the high cost of real estate property, especially in the city, if you're familiar with Philippines, Metro Manila, the workforce are prefer to reside in the nearby provinces. Thus, it's also a requirement or a need to buy or own a car. So, as a result, in our survey in 2022, it indicates that half of the household own at least a motorcycle, tricycle, of half of the household, and 11% of that respondents owned either a car, a jeep, and very minimal owning electric jeepneys. So that was post-pandemic, which I would say really during pandemic, we really need the transportation to move in some areas, especially when during post-pandemic. Okay. And I would also share some interesting facts about our country. So we are aware that Philippines is an archipelago up to composing of 7,107 islands. So if we are planning to stay one island per day, we are saying that we can calculate that it will take around 19 years for us to complete the the visit for these islands. In terms of jeepney, which is close to our topic now, Philippine jeepney is one of the most iconic vehicles. This originated from the American military jeep that was left behind after World War. And then later on, it was modified by the Filipino, extending the chassis, providing or adding roofs and seats, and then later on this was became the public utility vehicle in the Philippines. But nowadays there were programs. Sorry. Hello.
Cheryl, hey, we're facing a little technical issue, and Benedict is solving it as we speak. The jeepney, Cheryl, does it look like an old school military jeep?
Yes.
Or yeah, it
Yeah.
still does. And it's a
Yes.
version. There's an electric version you were mentioning that is available now.
Actually, the government is doing a program, of course, to increase to more sustainable, safer, and compliant standards. So there's a program to modernize this jeepney and replacing it into electric.
Yeah, so it's part of automotive culture in Philippines. Is it
Yes.
also? Would it also be a typical company car?
No. So it usually a public transportation, sometimes being used by the tourists or of strolling in the country.
I
Yeah.
see. I see. I see. Cheryl, would it be possible for you to share your presentation with us? Because we see that
All
we
right.
we continue to having some technical issues here.
Share. Hmm. It's not allowing me to share.
Let me see if I can do it on my end. Apologies for this, ladies and gentlemen. Let's hope that technology works a bit better. Am I sharing,
I'm not
Benedict?
sure if you can see now my screen.
Okay. Yeah, we can. Yeah, we can. Cheryl, thank you so much for your help.
Do you see the slide or the presentation mode?
We see the
Right.
slides now with your slides on the left-hand side. If you could perhaps click on presentation mode so we can see the full screen.
Hold on. How about now? Can you see now?
Yeah, we can see your browser. We cannot see the presentation. Otherwise, Cheryl, just go back to the previous presentation.
Okay. And Benedict cannot share.
Benedict is struggling with the platform,
Yeah.
but maybe before, let's
Maybe I'll
go on.
just share my words.
Yeah,
With,
exactly, and we'll just talk about it. I think the
yeah.
next topic, Cheryl, would be fleet in the Philippines.
Yeah. Yeah, so for fleet in the Philippines, it's very important for us to understand the market dynamics. And as a fleet manager, needs to have a better understanding, at least on the six factors that I can say, to be
Mm-hmm,
able to have an effective fleet management with strategies effective uh, to Philippine market specific. So we have six factors that I can say. First is the market factors. So in Philippines, most of our fleet vehicles are either locally assembled or
mm-hmm,
parts are assembled or imported from China, Thailand, South Korea, and Japan. So it is very important for a fleet or sourcing manager like me to plan ahead to be able to meet the demand and supply given the necessary lead time uh, to meet no the supply chain process requirements. So if the
mm-hmm.
company practice, for example, if practicing buying instead of leasing, it is also recommended, I would say, to come up with, for example, if they're buying for a fixed base model
Mm-hmm.
in their fleet requirement, it is important for them to consider at least to come up a backup model. This
Yeah.
is to ensure that in case if there are supply issues coming from those countries, then we can have alternative solution.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, so another option also is to manage the supply and cost and to work with a reliable partner. So we are working closely with a one contractor vendor, and
Mm-hmm.
then we will enter into an agreement or we in a form of a master service agreement. That
Yeah.
way we will have a close deal with them and they can supply with us on a timely manner.
Yeah.
So, on the other hand, I would say that for the Philippine for the market factors, it is also important for us to consider the cultural factor
Yeah.
because here, same as for example, buying car, it is a status symbol. So
Mm.
same as on the leasing for business consumption, the decision must maybe also influenced by the industry practice, whether to lease or to buy. Hence, it's difficult for us to follow the global direction sometimes because
Yeah.
uh, the situation here is different. So maybe it's a form of we can say an employee benefit that
Mm-hmm.
the global cannot see it. Another factor also is the regulatory requirements. So here
Mm-hmm.
we need to um, comply or the fleet manager must have a better understanding on the regulations to comply and of course to have a proper planning on their fleet requirements. Okay, I can
And I
see
think
this
the
slide.
presentation is back. Yeah.
Yes. And of course, the third one is the cost factor. So costs vary significantly in the Philippines due to the import duties, taxes, fuel prices, and maintenance costs. However, I would say these are uncontrollable. So for fleet managers or sourcing managers like me, I can focus more on the things that I can influence. So to
Mm-hmm.
lower the cost. Hence,
Mm-hmm.
I would select, for example, the type of vehicle that is cost efficient and also doing a volume consolidation of the requirement, as
Yeah.
mentioned earlier, so that we can come up with a better pricing whenever we negotiate with our partner, with our suppliers. And
Understood.
also, as mentioned, it's good that we can have also a 1 year, at least a 1 year contract. And then with that also, we need to have to develop a strategies that can be beneficial for the company.
Hmm.
When it comes to logistical factors, we are aware that our infrastructure and geographical considerations is a thing that we need to consider in Philippines, composed by 7,000 plus islands.
Yeah.
So when selecting the type of vehicles, we need to consider what are the types of vehicles that can meet or suitable to our condition. So for
Hmm.
our case, we select Toyota as our brands for our fleet.
Hmm.
Then we need also to consider if there are enough service centers throughout the country side. So something that we need to consider. It's not that, for example, if a strategy is in place and then bring down to local, so we need to challenge back. And of course, doing that, we can secure exception from the category managers handling the negotiation at the global with the strategies. And of course, the environmental factors as well is important. So here we are in Philippines, we are issuing a car compliant to Euro 4 or Euro 5 standards, but very minimal for Euro 5 standards. These are important because these are vehicles that with lower emissions. Sometimes we have to consider, it's also good to consider if we can provide electric cars or hybrid vehicles if allowed by the budget. But of course, this is very much costly in Philippines. Hybrid cars are also slowly increasing nowadays with more model options available provided by different car manufacturers. However, as mentioned, this is quite costly. So in some companies, there are allocated budget to fund the needs, no, to shift from the traditional buying to leasing. So this is part of program in some company in their sustainability project. So
Hmm.
if a certain company would like to shift from the traditional, maybe they need to check if there's a certain fund to support on that objective or goal.
Yeah.
So in terms of technological factors, of course, we are aware that there are technologies that we can integrate with our fleet management systems that can help us also to analyze our data in doing the strategies such as the GPS, mobile app. These are common. But later on in my slide, I will share as well that we need to weigh it in some point of our practice. Okay,
Hmm.
so with a growing awareness of our environmental issues, fleet managers may also be responsible for implementing sustainability initiative. Okay, the next slide, please.
Cheryl, just to be conscious of time, we've lost a bit of time with the technical issues, of
Yes,
course, which I regret. If we can kind of close in about 5 minutes and just run
yeah,
through the
sure.
highlights per slide, that would be really amazing. Thank you so much.
Okay, so I guess I'm going through with the challenges maybe in the Philippine market. That's the last slide. So I guess 5 minutes could cover that. So what
Okay.
are the challenges we are facing here in Philippines? So I would say, for example, now we are in the um, we need to comply or we need to follow whatever the global strategies. So sometimes this is a challenge to us, but weighing those two option model, whether we buy or we lease, we know there are advantages on both sides. Buying may be a cheaper, but will also require a good cash flow and financial flexibility. So it also entails a lot of administrative burden. So in our case, for Philippines, we are for Behringer, no, we are still in a buying method, but due to the low manpower costs, then we can outsource the fleet management a fleet management service provider to manage our fleet solutions. So to oversee the fleet requirements of the company.
Mhm.
So in leasing, we can say it's efficient. Earlier mentioned that we should see the objective if it's for a sustainability, but since there are limited leasing providers in the Philippines, and the schemes offered might not be the same compared to other developed countries. The terms of the leasing might not be attractive so much, not convincing, weighing the cost versus the efficiency. And that's the reason why some of the companies are still on the buying method. And since the low manpower cost, so this is one of the reason why we are still on the buying method.
And
But
leasing, Cheryl, is also very different in Philippines compared to other countries because you have two parts in the leasing contract. Is that correct?
yes, so for the leasing contract, it can be leasing or finance. Yeah, so there are different ways. So we can, for example, full service operating lease contract. So we can hand over all the requirements to a certain provider. So that's the difference. And industry practice, I would say for the leasing, it was mentioned earlier that for Philippine market, it can be a challenge because this can be can be as employee benefit and even a way to attract talents to the company. So
Mhm.
for a multinational company, it would be challenging to shift to the leasing considering this industry practice
Yeah,
happening in Philippines.
I understand. And still a few highlights about Philippines. Would you say it's a diesel country or is it more a petrol country?
So of course, diesel is more cheaper. So we prefer, for example, on our fleet, to go on the diesel.
Okay. Um, you need to buy the diesel, of course. How does it work practically? There's one big national fuel company, and then
Yes,
there's a few alternative players. How
yes.
how have you set up the fuel provision for your employees?
Yeah, so for our employees, we have a fleet cards. So there are big companies such as we call it the three big C's companies, offering this fleet card solution. So setting up the fleet, I would say limit, no fuel limit for each employee. Of course, this is calculated based on the business requirements and for personal use. No, we also allow this to our employees. So this
Okay.
is somehow controlling the spending of fuel in the company.
Mhm. But still with that benefit aspect that you already highlighted in the beginning, right?
Yeah.
And
So,
then from a
but we have set this reasonable personal consumption. So this
okay,
is allowed.
all right. Um, electric vehicles, you mentioned very briefly in the beginning that there is like a sparkle of electrification. Um, is there any incentive that from government incentive that would help companies to, move to electric vehicles?
Yeah, so for our government now, they're attracting more people to buy electric cars. That's why there's this train law in the Philippines, exempting the excise taxes imposed in the traditional petroleum fueled vehicles, and in somehow incentive in prioritization when it comes to registration. And in our traffic situation, we have also a management, to control our traffic on the streets. So we have this number coding. When
Hmm.
your plate number is on a certain days, you are not allowed to go out of the street. But if
Okay,
you are in electric cars, then you are exempted as well.
okay. So there's a bit of an incentive for the user of the electric car as well.
Yeah.
One last question, Cheryl, is more about TCO, about cost. You already mentioned that there are different elements that you can influence, but also elements that you cannot influence. Would you say that when you calculate your TCO, would you say that this has been increasing over time? And what are the trends that you see in the cost of managing a car fleet in Philippines?
Yeah, so the TCO elements is really important thing that fleet manager must watch out. So here in our company, we tried to work on lowering down or bringing down the cost, the TCO components. So because this will help us on the longer period of if we can improve or we can bring down the cost elements. So
Mhm.
TCO is, I would say, is a balance between savings opportunity. So the more you check, the more you review, the more strategies in place, the more savings opportunity you will get. And in a long run, it will benefit the company. So in our case here, there are some strategies that handled by the global category managers, and somehow uh, we need to follow those strategies and even the tail end spend because this still affect the components of the TCO.
Cheryl Esteban, sourcing manager at Boehringer Ingelheim. I thank you so much for your contribution today. Our apologies for the small technical issues that we faced, but you've managed perfectly, and it was a pleasure having you. Thank you so much, and hope to
Right,
see you
thank
soon,
you.
Cheryl. Now, for the next session, we have a larger panel. We have invited 4 people, and I would also like Roberto, my colleague, to join us on stage. Now, we have invited Anna Proshak, procurement category lead at Philip Morris, Ankur Sharma, regional sourcing lead at G Healthcare, Sumo from Boehringer Ingelheim, sourcing manager in Thailand, and we have Raluca, global fleet manager from an animal healthcare company. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for joining us today. It is a pleasure having you all in our session. We'll be doing this a bit of a Q&A style together with Luberto. So Luberto and I will ask you several questions. And I will kick off with a very simple question and, if possible, a very short answer of about 1 minute. What can you tell us about your fleet in APAC? Ankur, I would like to start with you.
Sure. Firstly, thanks for having me here, part of this panel.
It's a pleasure.
Yeah. So in terms of fleet, we have a presence in around 13 plus countries in APAC with a fleet size of 1,200 plus vehicles, which are a mix of like both benefit cars, which forms around 30% of our total fleet, and tool of trade vehicles, which is around 70% of our total fleet in the region. And the tool of trade vehicles are basically being provided to our fleet service engineers and sales staff. And being into the medtech industry, our key customers are usually hospitals, which are both located in the cities as well as the countryside. So our TOT drivers, do usually drive longer distances to the countryside. And in terms of the top markets in the region, in terms of fleet size, we have Japan, India, Australia, and South Korea in the same order. So that's basically a brief overview of our fleet in the APAC region.
Thanks so much, Ankur. Anna, can we please go to Philip Morris and a short profile of your Asian fleet?
Yes, thank you, Yves, for inviting me. When it comes to Philip Morris fleet, indeed in APAC, we have now almost half of our fleet, which is a big chunk, and it is split around the geography, widely spread, okay? And in our fleet in APAC, we mostly have working tool cars, with benefit cars being just a small part. But the working tool cars consist of both passenger cars and LCVs as well. And when it comes to the operational model, I would say that 2/3 of our fleet in APAC is already in lease, but some part still remains in buy, as you may expect.
Super. Thanks so much, Anna. Samo, can we please go to you? Quick profile of the Boeing fleet.
Yes. For fleet profile for Boeing Ingelheim, actually, first of all, I would like to make it clear for my roles. I am taking care of about the local sourcing here in Thailand, and for Boeing in Thailand, we manage our company car by leasing. The majority company car are few for staff. We have around 90% of sedan models, and the rest are pickup truck for our farm technician and luxury cars for our executives. This is the basically information that I have.
Super. Thanks so much, Samo. Raluca,
Yes, hello everybody.
very nice to meet you again.
Nice to see everybody. Yes, so for us, we have around 300 vehicles in APAC, spread around in 5 countries, all lease cars, all tool of trade, and all hybrid vehicles.
Thank you so much, Raluca. Luberto, do you have a question for the ladies and gentlemen in the panel?
Yes, of course. At least I've one for Anna at this moment, because you if I heard you correctly, you said that a part of the fleet is via leasing and another part is via the articles. Why is that, and do you have some preference yourself?
No. It's usually assessed through the exercise, which is lease versus buy analysis, which is done regularly, I would say, and very specific to the conditions of every particular market. So the decision is based always on the data.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Is that the same for you, Ankur? Would that assessment be done on a country by country basis, or do you follow a specific corporate instruction to go one way or the other?
No, so we also do it based on country to country basis. And talking about our current policy, so we have all entire the entire fleet we have is on a leasing model. So we do have operating lease model in majority of the countries, but then we do follow or we have a financial lease model in some of the countries like India, where it's more related to the salary sacrifice benefit that employee can have. So yeah, the approach is country by country.
Okay. Samo, your colleague just explained us that in the Philippines, they continue buying the vehicles. You in Thailand, you decided to purchase the vehicles. How would that work from a reporting perspective, from an operational management perspective? Because you have two different models, but you sit in the same region. Do you talk the same language as Cheryl when it comes to car fleets?
Actually, we first of all would like to say that we always align with the global sourcing strategy here, and majority sourcing strategy here is leasing the car is the first priority. But however, it depends on the requirement in each country. As far as I know, in Boeing Ingelheim, we have a few countries have a decision to buy a car as an asset, but the rest we are on in the car leasing strategy. So for in terms of management and fleet management, yes, we do the fleet management under the car leasing strategy.
Thanks so much.
What I'm also curious about, Eve, is that it is a question actually for all of you. That at the beginning of this expert meeting, of course, we also talked about sustainability, and if you should do that via electrification or another way. And that and sometimes it even happens that, like from a European perspective, when it's done globally, is somehow forced on other regions to have like electrification. So I would like to hear to come back to one question: where is there a focus in your policy on sustainability, and how does it look? What does that look like?
Maybe jump to Raluca for her perspective on sustainability.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, this is the question of the moment, right? So, of course, all companies have their goals on sustainability, and we are focusing mostly in other regions on introducing electric vehicles. But we know that in Asia Pacific, it's not always the best choice when we look at the type of energy available. So that's why for us in the countries where we have fleet in the region, we decided for now to switch to hybrid. So not plug-in hybrid, so the full hybrid vehicles. And we take this as a step towards our goals in sustainability. And of course, we will assess country by country, and if there is the opportunity for the green energy, then of course we will introduce full electric vehicles.
Mm. So hybrid as a realistic first step. That's what I read between the lines, Luca.
Yes.
Anna, how would that be on your end? Is that a strategy that you recognize?
A kind of similar, I fully agree, yes. We have our global strategy, which is applicable to APAC as well, because it's global, okay? And definitely we have our targets in sustainability and looking for hybrids as first option. And then definitely what I can say can work good as well is to have a kind of pilots tests in the markets with a limited number of EVs, knowing that yes, indeed the infrastructure is not there yet. But if you see the opportunity to have green electricity supply, you may have a pilot in the market with limited number of cars to see how it works.
How are these tests going, Anna? Because, like you said, probably some challenges left and right, but are you hopeful of being able to implement EVs in a certain time lapse?
In some markets, we do. We are testing how it goes, yes. If we are sure that we can provide sustainable electricity as well for those cars. Yes.
Yes, so it really differs per market. Oh, sorry. No, my question was, so that is really depending on the country instead of you can do that for the whole region at once.
Absolutely. It's so far it's country based.
Okay, thank you.
Some more. Thailand has been put forward as one of the countries in Asia with the fastest growing implementation of electric. Registrations of electric vehicles are rising more than any other country. Is that something you bring along at Boehringer Ingelheim as well? Is that a topic that you talk about with your stakeholders?
In general, yes, the Thai people increasing consumption about the EV in Thailand in current situation, but in our freight management in Boehringer Ingelheim, in our region, we do not yet have fleet management for electronic vehicle. Yeah, but however, from such a sustainability perspective, we are in progress of transitioning from gasoline car model that we have on hand to hybrid model. And this is the best approach we can take at the moment, because of limitations that other guys here share about the EV infrastructure, such as EV stations, geographics, and work areas. But however, we are continually exploring opportunities to transit to EV in terms of the corporate fleet management here.
Understood. Let's go back to the core of the topic today, which is more about procurement. And I remember one of the things that Thierry and Cameron mentioned in the first presentation, where they said, well, we suggest or we recommend our customers to share their strategic targets with us so that we can, as a supply chain, we can help them achieve strategic targets. So my question to you now would be, when tendering or when reviewing your collaboration with suppliers, what are the KPIs that you put forward? Ankur, I would like to ask you first.
Okay,
What
sure.
What are the KPIs that you find most important with your suppliers, for your suppliers?
Right. So see, there are when we evaluate any fleet management company, so we basically divide the entire evaluation process into two parts. Carrying a equal weightage. So first is the commercial evaluation. Second is the technical, capabilities of the fleet management companies. So when coming to commercial, we do evaluate fleet management companies based on all standard service fee, which forms part of their monthly lease rentals. Payment terms are really important to us. So globally, we follow net 120 days payment terms, and that is our baseline. When we evaluate any vendor globally. Then another the add-on benefits as part of the agreements, like profit share, inclusion of profit share models, or having mileage recalculations as part of the product offering by fleet management companies, some kind of sign-on bonuses or volume rebates, and lastly the foreclosure terms. So this is something which forms part of the commercial evaluation that we do. And then coming to the technical evaluation, this is basically where we look at their geographical coverage, their financial stability, the market size or the market share, and the product maturity. Sustainability is also important. So this is where we assess suppliers' commitments towards sustainability in general, and just to understand how they can support us promote and meet our sustainability goals. And also we look at other offerings from the fleet management companies, like driver safety programs. We also check with them about data security initiatives, or how they maintain the data internally, including details like their ISO certifications or others. And then we do analyze vendors on their capability to offer like add-on services, something like consulting services, or maybe the fuel cards, telematics. And since we are all talking about EVs today, so maybe their ability to install home or office chargers, either directly or via their partners. And lastly, we also sometimes ask for client references. Depending upon the situation, we sometimes connect with their existing customers to take feedbacks. So all in all, this is how we do evaluate, assess the vendors when we are running the RRFPs, in the region as well as globally, I would say.
Very comprehensive answer, Ankur. Thank you so much. Anna, Philip Morris is very public about its commitment to safety, its commitment to sustainability, and I cannot think otherwise that you include your supply chain into those targets. Could you please share with us how that happens practically, pragmatically, when you reach out to a vendor, when you assess the quality of a vendor? How do you integrate those core strategic targets that Philip Morris is putting forward?
Well, definitely safety is the first priority for PMI. That's clear. And having this in mind, in our global policy, we have safety standards established, which are must worldwide, not only for APAC. Okay, this is a global policy, how it works. And what we face in APAC, that, for instance, not always the standards, normal standards in the market may meet PMI standards, which may be higher. What I mean, sometimes some models of cars that we may consider may lack basic for us requirements like ABS, ADAS, and so on. So that might be an issue. So we look at markets from this perspective, from our minimum safety standards that we must follow. From supplier perspective, when it comes to leasing companies, not to models of the cars, what you may face is that due to these complicated geographies in APAC that you have, not always easy to get the same service level among all of the geographies. So this is another focus that we put in front of suppliers when we communicate to them. And in terms of sustainability, definitely, we have, as mentioned before, we have the targets, which are part of our RFPs always. And suppliers are well aware of our policies and our requirements, both safety and sustainability, and are required to follow this during RFP.
Fantastic. Conscious of time, because we're reaching close to the end of today's session, I'd like a quick roundtable and start with you, Samo. If you would give 3 short tips to fleet managers who are discovering APAC, who are tendering in APAC, what would those 3 tips be from your perspective?
3 tips from my first is, of course, we are sourcing. We need to conscious on the cost and TCO. But however, the first priority that we need to concern, the second one is should be the safety standard that we need to get alignment with our global standard policy as well. This and the third one is should be the sustainability and operational efficiency. These 3 tips that I would like to say that these 3 tips or aspects that I recommend to include when we are performing a bidding or RFP with the supplier. It should have this kind of aspect or perspectives in our RFP. Yeah.
Thanks so much. Thanks so much, Samo. Raluca, familiar for you?
Yes. So from my perspective, I would say the first tip would be to think global but act local. Even if you are managing the fleet from global, like in our case, you need to take into account the limitations of the area and act in that way, even if you go with the local suppliers in some cases. The second one would be in terms of sustainability, like I already mentioned, not to look immediately for electric vehicles, but maybe take hybrid as the middle ground option there. And of course, in terms of safety, make sure you are looking into, for example, telematics implementation in the area, because it's way easier than doing it in Europe, for example.
Thanks so much, Raluca. Ankur, your 3 words of wisdom for the fleet management community.
Right. So 3 tips from my end, especially to manage the fleet very effectively in the APAC region. First would be, localization. So be it your strategic approach or your operation management, I guess, considering current market situation in APAC, having a localized approach is a key for effective fleet management in APAC due to its diverse culture, languages, the regulatory compliance or the infrastructure landscape that we have. We cannot replicate the approach that we follow in other region into APAC, but definitely we can consider adapting to some of the best practices that they are doing in their countries or the region. Second tip that I would give is, try utilizing consulting services from the fleet management companies. So being industry experts, I guess fleet management companies can add a real value by providing realistic insights, both at a strategic and operational level. And, just try to do so, or to leverage their expertise wherever feasible. So I know, I mean, not all fleet management companies across APAC provide that service, but wherever it is applicable, you should obviously try it. Lastly, the most important tip that I would like to share is respect the cultural sensitivity. So understanding local customs, traditions, and business etiquettes is very crucial, for effective communication and building strong relationship, be it with your drivers, your local business teams, or your vendor partners across different countries in the APAC. So you need to have a little bit flexibility in your approach, I would say, so in order to manage the fleet effectively in the region. So yeah, that's my 3 tips.
Very valuable. Thanks so much, Ankur. And Anna, that brings me back to you for your 3 tips to
that would not be 3. I would tell one to add on or to everything said before, that I fully agree. Try to standardize, to use a kind of templates, some standard documents across the region that might help you a kind of slightly educate the markets, and at the same time to ensure that you are following the same approach in every market, definitely agile with respect to market specific and market culture.
Thanks so much, Anna Proszek, Philip Morris, Samo, Beringer Ingelheim, Raluca, Global Fleet Manager for Animal Healthcare Company, and Ankur Sharma at GE Healthcare. I'd like to thank you so much for participating in today's session. Luberto, thank you for joining me in the Q&A. And I would like to hope that we will meet very soon, either at the Global Fleet Summit in Cascais, or hopefully at the Fleet APAC Summit in Bangkok. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. Which leaves us with the sad task of saying goodbye. But before we do that, we'd like to make a little bit of promotion for the Global Fleet Summit. There are still some tickets available. Please register quickly if you want to attend. Don't forget, there's also going to be a regional session at the Global Fleet Summit, a regional session APAC. We have super interesting speakers for you. We can leave that a bit as a surprise, but it's absolutely worth coming over. And then this leaves me with thanking the founding partners, Avens and Oryx, Thierry and Cameron, who joined us for the first session. And then the only thing that is remaining for me is to thank you for being here today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you to all the speakers as well. And I hope to see you very soon at one of our next events. Have a good day. Bye-bye.